Hello and welcome to today's video. So this time we're taking a look back at the very earliest years of the Folio Society. That's when their first books were published in 1947. We'll also look at the books published in 48 and 1949. We'll also look at some of the Society's creators and some of its artists as well. It's a fascinating period in publishing history and one which I really like. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's get to it. For this video, we'll take a detailed look at the first 3 years of the Society's output, from 1947 to 1949, 22 books in total. Quoting from an essay produced for the Society's 50th anniversary by Sue Bradbury, who was the former editorial director of the Society, a brief history included in Folio 50 and available on Goodreads. Now, I'll link to this particular essay in the description down below. For Charles Ede, the founder of the Folio Society, coming back from the war into this world was a transforming experience. He had fallen in love with the work of William Morris and the Kelmscott Press while he was still a schoolboy, and as a soldier had already begun a collection of Kelmscott, Golden Cockerel and non-such editions. But now he decided that being a private press publisher was not for him. Alerted to a decline in standards that might not easily be reversed, and convinced that good design and production should be available to everyone and not just to a few comparatively rich book buyers, he embarked on a plan to produce books to the highest possible standards using commercial methods. Looking back on his youthful idealism many years later, Charles admitted that had he been older and wiser, the Folio Society would probably never have happened. His friend and mentor, Christopher Sanford, owner of the Golden Cockerel Press, was not convinced by his plan for a poor man's fine edition and doubted it would work. But life is full of wonders, he said, and people like you do get away with things, like Lane and his penguins, so thumbs up. In 1946, undeterred and recently demobbed, Charles acquired a basic training at the London College of Printing, and in October 1947, the newly fledged society published its first book, Tales by Tolstoy, with pen and ink drawings by Elizabeth McFadden. So here's Folio 21. This will be used as a reference guide. Now, this was written by Charles Ede, and it's basically a bibliography of the first 21 years of the Folio Society. Beautifully illustrated book, this one, and each book has its own little entry. So you can go through. It's ideal if you're a collector. You can go through. You get a sampling of the artwork, the covers, that sort of thing, and also any interesting notes by Charles Ede, the designer and the man who was there. So there's like the little sections on each books. They are numbered in here, but I haven't sort of stuck to that numbering system. I'm not sure if I'm going to yet, but they are numbered in publication order, or what they considered publication order at the time, with illustrations. So we will quote from this one as we work our way through the first few years. Also in a similar vein was Folio 60. So Folio 60 obviously came many years later, and this one does add detail to the early books which isn't in the original Folio 21. So you do sort of need both books, and if you're going to buy any of the Folio bibliographies, and there's 6 I think, these two, the 21 and 60, are the ones that I would recommend. This one in particular is just a gorgeous book. But if we get into the bibliography here, you can see some of the entries are actually a bit bigger than Folio 21, and they do add additional information, stuff about reprints and things like that. But the first few years doesn't get masses of coverage because there's so much to go through. But it's a great book, and I do recommend tracking this one down. And it's not that expensive. It's about £20 or so. So yeah, recommended that one. So these are the 2 books we'll be referring to as we work our way through the Society's publications. I have also referenced a great blog page on the Folio Society devotees webpage, hosted on Library Thing, which I recommend if you'd like a closer look at the illustrations used within these books. Links to everything mentioned in the video in the description down below. 1947, Tales by Tolstoy. And this includes 5 novellas, which we'll have a look at now. So we've got The Raid, 2 Hussars, 3 Deaths, Polyhushka, 2 Old Men, and The Death of Ivan Likovich. That's what, six short stories, and they're sort of like, well, they are short stories, or even you could say novellas, translated by Louise and Almea Maud and by Constance Garnett. Now there's 9 pen and ink sketches by Elizabeth McFadden, and these are interspersed throughout, and they're almost like, there's an example, they're almost like, well, I don't know how you describe it, very, very busy is, I think, perhaps the best way to describe these. But they do fit in with the stories. On the reverse of the illustration is a blank page, and each story's got 1 or 2 illustrations. Now this is in a white just jacket, but printed in red and black. 280 pages, 25.3 by 16 centimetres. There's the original cloth boards. And it's like black cloth quarter and then red cloth for the rest of it, which is sort of in keeping with the rest of the design of the book. As I said, this was the very, very first book published by the Folio Society. This is an exceptional copy. The wrapper is so difficult to find in nice condition, unfaded. This one's got very minuscule wear, but much more superior to most of the copies that I've seen online. I have a unwrappered copy, which I'm currently reading at the moment, and it's surprisingly good. It's the first Tolstoy I've ever actually read. So in Folio 21, Charles Ede says this was a personal selection designed to give a cross-section of Tolstoy's work in the medium. Because of paper rationing and the difficulty of getting printers to take on new work at this time, the book was produced in Belgium, as were Trilby and The Confessions of an English Opium Eater, which we'll see those ones a bit later on. The printers who only undertook the job as a favour were not used to this type of work, and the standard leaves a good deal to be desired. So Charles Ede, then, the designer of this book, you know, there we are, that this book has been designed by Charles Ede. He wasn't that, you know, he wasn't that happy with the outcome, but I think it's just perfect. I mean, really, it's exactly what I want from the Folio Society. It's nice, clear type, decent margins, illustrated. It's great. In Folio 60, they mentioned that this book was printed in Belgium because of paper rationing and the difficulties of finding printers willing to take on new work in post-war Britain. The illustrations are the first and apparently penultimate published works of the artist. Well, I don't know. I think it's a great, great book. Now, I found an unwrappered one for about £10. Dust wrappered ones do cost considerably more. You are, for a really, really nice one, you're probably approaching as much as £100 now for this book in tip-top shape, because it is that scarce in the wrapper. But if you're happy, as I was for quite a while, to have one just with the boards, just as like a reading copy, just to say you've got the first Folio Society book, you pick one up for, say, £10 to £15. So a great, great book, and a great book to start the series. Love it. Okay, so our second book is this one, Aucassin and Nicolette, and this was translated by F.W. Bawden, and it includes 44 drawings by Lettice Sanford. It was bound in the white cloth, blocked with a blue fleur-de-lis pattern and silver lettering, and it came in a glassine cover, which was printed in black. Obviously, no slipcase, and none of the books we're going to see today actually came in a slipcase originally. There was one book which was a limited edition, which actually did have a slipcase, but the rest of them, this is very much the dust wrapper period of the Folio Society. Now, it is a beautiful, beautiful book, and you can see that the glassine wrapper there is printed, very, very fragile and prone to getting damaged, these, because they're basically, it's just plastic. This one's got a little tear down the bottom there. And I would imagine that if the wrapper came off, these boards would mark up very, very easily with like fingerprints when it was being read. So Charles Ede in Folio 21 says, one of the reasons for publishing this title was that at this date, printers were allowed to supply paper from their own ration for books of up to 64 pages. So that's why this actually was able to get into print. Now, it says the head and tail pieces matched the weight of the type extremely well, and as a unity, the book can perhaps still be considered amongst the Society's most successful publications. So I think he means like the titles and the little illustration down the bottom there. He said on the debit side, it would probably have been better to use a Roman initial for the verse, while the binding was marred by a ragged line where the foil blocking met the edges of the board. Oh, well, there you go. I mean, it is a beautiful book. So with some of these books, I'm not sure, or I've never come across them before, and this was one such book. So I did look this one up, and it says that Assassin Nicolette, which was a 12th or 13th century book, was published anonymously and is a French medieval fictional story. It is a unique example of a chantifable, literally a sung story, a combination of prose and verse. It's a love story at its core, and not one I'm rushing to read. However, it is a beautiful early book though. And as you can see, it really is quite a nice edition, this one. Very, very nice indeed, really. I suppose maybe one day I might read this one, but yeah, it's not one I'm rushing to read. Now, I wanted to have a quick word about these glassine wrappers. So there are a few books in the main run and some of the presentation volumes which came in these glassine wrappers. And as I said, they're very, very delicate. You can sort of see there's a line where the wrapper was. So the first copy of this I got actually didn't have a wrapper at all, and the boards were much grubbier because it had been handled. But if you can find a book with a glassine wrapper, even if the wrapper is a bit damaged like mine, I would say grab it, because these have got a very short shelf life and they perhaps haven't survived anything like in the numbers that people might think. So I would grab these. They can be cleaned, so you could, if you were feeling brave, you could immerse the glassine wrapper in just a little thing of hot water, a little bowl of hot water, give it a gentle rub, and you will see the dirt come off. But you do also risk damaging the glassine wrapper at the same time, and I would almost be advising against it. But there we are. So yeah, that was another gorgeous book for number 2. So the next book, and the last one for 1947, was Trilby by George du Maurier. Then this one's got 6 plates of pencil studies by the author, a grey dust jacket printed in red and black, 276 pages, and it's 26.2 by 19.1 centimetres in diameter. This is another one printed in Belgium, and it's got reproductions of 6 pencil drawings by the author. It was in Garamond type, quarter maroon cloth, so let's have a little look at that. Yeah, quarter maroon cloth, look at that. And decorative paper sides printed with a repeat pattern in maroon on the grey from a design by Alice Hinson. And the grey dust jacket printed in red and black from the same pattern as the boards. And you're probably a bit more familiar with Trilby than some of the other books we've seen today. So Trilby is set in the 1850s in an idyllic Bohemian Paris. Though Trilby features the stories of 2 English artists and a Scottish artist, one of the most memorable characters is Svengali, a rogue, masterful musician and hypnotist. Trilby, the novel's heroine, is a young orphan girl working in Paris as an artist's model and laundress. All the men in the novel are in love with her. The relationship between Trilby and Svengali forms only a small, though crucial portion of the novel, which is mainly an evocation of Paris and its surroundings at that time. So there you go. Yeah, bit light on the illustrations here, but I guess it is what it is. But it's a really handsome, it is really large compared to a lot of the Folio Society books. Certainly not the largest, but it's a big book. And the 3 that were published in 1947 do form quite the series. Very easy to get this one. I think this one cost like a tenner in the dust wrapper for me, so I did very well there. And yeah, I was really pleased with that one. Now, also released, it was dated 1947, but actually didn't get published until 1948, was the first folio poetry book, and it's much smaller, and it's Shakespeare's Sonnets, and that's what we'll be looking at here. And this is decorated by Ronald's Stone, and it's quarter bound in green leather with red cloth boards. So there we are. So that's the quarter green leather. And you can see this is interesting. So my dust wrapper, very, very scarce, this one in dust wrapper, But you can see my dust wrapper is missing a bit at the top and bottom. So consequently, that top part of the spine has got faded. Look at that. But still, this is a book that's in print today by the Folio Society, and I think between now and 2000 it had 4 different printings of Shakespeare's sonnet. Now you'll notice on the title page it says 1947, but this wasn't actually released until January 1948. It's in a monotype, Perpetua type, 13 point. It was bound by Stevenson in that quarter green leather. Now Charles Ede, in Folio 21, says the modern spelling text was that of A.H. Bullen. The calligraphic headpieces, that's these bits here, were drawn in pen and ink and printed in green. Great pains were taken to match the headpieces to the optical width of each sonnet, and their accurate positioning gave the printer a somewhat nightmare problem. Yes, I see. So he's trying to get those little illustrations right in the middle of the of each page. The book was intended for publication in 1947 and is so dated. A second edition, reset and in a slipcase, was then next issued in 1958, and of course we'll get to that one when we eventually get to 1958. But it's the first Shakespeare in the Folio Society. It's something that they published an awful lot of since then, and they continue to publish to this day. It's a beautiful edition, and I don't mind the Folio Society Shakespeare. They are very nice indeed, and as I said, this one in a wrapper is really scarce, but all their poetry books, the early ones at least, are in this much more compact format. It's not much bigger than a paperback, and yeah, very, very nice to feel in the hand. So the first book for 1948 was Candide, or The Optimist, by Voltaire, and this was translated by Henry Morley, and it includes 7 full-colour lithographs. There we are, look at that, by Kenneth Hobson, and it's a quarter bound in black buckram with marbled paper covers. Now this was issued in a dust wrapper, which sadly I've not got. It's a dust wrapper I'm still looking for. It is quite expensive when you find it because it's so lovely, but I'll get one eventually. It's 136 pages, 22.1 by 13.4 centimeters in dimension. Now Charles Ede in Folio 21 says, unfortunately there's no record of which translation was used for this edition. The originals of the plates were in pen and ink and watercolour. Each chapter had a pen and ink headpiece, and the title page was hand-drawn. The illustrations were not commissioned by the Society and had been produced some years previously. The text type was too large for the page and quite inadequately leaded, and you can see what he means. They are really, really, it's like the entire book has been printed in bold for this first printing. This is a book, once again, which the Folio Society has reprinted a few times. The current edition is an absolute masterpiece, but it's I think you'll agree that the type is really, like, you know, hard, isn't it? It's not easy on the eye, which is not what we want from the Folio Society, but the illustrations in that are beautiful. So Folio 60 says the translation uses a slightly revised version of that made by Henry Morley, who lived from 1822 to 1894 and first published posthumously in 1922. He is not acknowledged anywhere in the text or in Folio 21, and it is possible that it was this version of the text that was to have been published with Hobson's illustrations, and that the two came into the Society's possession without any record of who was responsible for the translation. Now, Candide is a French satire written by Voltaire, a philosopher of the Age of Enlightenment, first published in 1759. The novella has been widely translated. A young man, Candide, lives a sheltered life in an Edenic paradise. This lifestyle is abruptly ended, followed by Candide's slow and painful disillusionment as he witnesses and experiences great hardships in the world. Now, I think you'll agree, apart from the type being a bit garish on the eye, the actual design, size and illustrations are absolutely lovely, and I think this is still a very, very beautiful book, and I really would like to find one in its quite tough dust wrapper, but as I said, there's like one copy out there at the moment, which is very expensive. I shall wait and try and find one at a bit more of a reasonable price. So the second book for 1948 was The Confessions of an English Opium Eater by Thomas de Quincey. And this one's got illustrations engraved on wood by Blair Hughes Stanton. Now, it's got a black ribbed cloth, the sides and the spine, with a design composed of rules of varying thicknesses in gold. The white dust jacket is printed in red and black. It's got 220 pages, 22.4 by 14.1 centimetres, and this was the third book printed in Belgium. Now, Charles Ede in Folio 21 says, "The type. We seem to have a fixation for this face. It's too small and the laid paper quite unsuitable for the fine textured engravings." Well, he's absolutely right. Look how small the typeface is. That is not fun at all, that. Not great. The illustrations, I think, are absolutely fine. Maybe not quite as sharp as we would perhaps expect. He says that a blank leaf was missed from the pagination of the prelims. The 10 headpieces had been engraved for another publisher who was unable to issue them. So it was for another book that these sort of headpieces were pinched from, which is quite interesting, isn't it? These bits at the start. Confessions of an English Open Eater is an 1821 autobiographical account written by Thomas de Quincey about his laudanum addiction and its effect on his life. The Confessions was the first major work of de Quincey published and the one that won him fame almost overnight. Well, there we are. I bet it is an interesting read, but perhaps not one that I'm going to rush to read. Not in that particular edition, because the type is, as Charles Ede says, just really small. I don't mind the illustrations there. It's got a little preface there as well. And that's the original preface. Well, there we are, and there we are. Look down the bottom, they're printed in Belgium. Excellent. Okay, so the next book we've got is The Crime of Sylvestre Bonnard by Anatole France. This is translated by R.N.E. Powers Mathers, and it says Lithographs by Hope Reed. 288 pages, and there's 8 plates, reproduced by Collotype in Perpetua type. It's got cream cloth, and on the front board and spine, titling in there. It's got like a little label on the spine there, and then quite nice boards on this one. My wrappers are quite low grade, as you can see. It's quite chipped and that, but it's all there. It's just in a bit of a state. Now, something quite interesting with this one, this copy, I did buy it off eBay, but it came with this letter from the Folio Society, from the Book Society, but in a Folio Society book. And we know that there are connections to the Folio Society and the Book Society, or the Book Club, because Alan Bott, who at this time was at Pan, was one of the founders or one of the investors in the early days of the Folio Society. Now, I think Alan Bott had died by June 1953, but I notice Josephine Bott is listed as one of the directors, along with Roger Vernon Hunt, who also worked for Pan at that time. Now, it says, we'd like to, dear member, this is Book Society member, not Folio Society. Dear member, we would like on the occasion of the coronation to mark our appreciation of your membership. We therefore would ask you to accept a gift book with our compliments. Now, I suspect that there were unsold copies of this book. I don't think it sold very well for the Folio Society at the time, and the Book Society did some sort of deal, underhanded or under the counter or behind the scenes, to buy remaindered stock, and then they just gave it away to Book Society members as a freebie. That's what it looks like to me, and we have found further evidence of this sort of thing online, so just something to look for if you've got this book or maybe other books in your collection which have got this Book Society letter inside. Interestingly, it's also got a Book Society ex-library paste down labelling. So the plot thickens. I mean, it really does, doesn't it? Was that put in by the Book Society and then sent out? I don't know. But here we are, and I just think it was unsold copies that the Folio Society had lying around. It didn't sell as well as they thought, and they gave it to the Book Society to send out as a freebie. That's my suspicion anyway. But we may never know. We may never know, but it's quite fascinating, isn't it? I'd be interested to know if you've got a copy of this book with the same lettering. Then we can almost confirm it, can't we? Now, the novel contains 2 stories, both related through the diary entries of Sylvestre Bonnard, a member of the Institut de France, historian and philosophist who lives among books. In the first part, La Bouche, he seeks in Sicily and Paris a precious manuscript of the French version of the Golden Legend, which he eventually obtains. In the second, Jean Alexander, he meets by chance a young girl named Jean, the granddaughter of a woman he once loved. To protect the child from her abusive guardian, Maître Mouchy, and from her employer, Mademoiselle Préfère, who herself has designs on Bonnard, Bernard in effect kidnaps her, and she ends up marrying Henry Gilles, one of Bonnard's students. So that's what's in this. It's basically two stories, and I think it's a really quite attractive one. The print is a little bit small for my preferred, but yeah, I think quite nice. Quite a long book, this one. But yeah, for some reason, I suspect this just did not sell that well. So yeah, interesting all the same, and I am pleased that I've got that little letter in with mine, adding another clue to its overall story. So the next book is another early favourite of mine, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Now this one's got 12 illustrations by Mervyn Peake, no less, and introduced by John Hampden. This is the original first printing of this one, like all these books are. It's got black and yellow print, and it's bound in a black, let's have a look, black and cream coloured cloth, divided down the covers there, and blocked with that image on the front. Very, very nice indeed. The dust jacket, which is scarce, has a similar version, but the figure is actually reversed compared to what it is on the front there, which is quite interesting. Yeah, 148 pages, 22.1 by 14.2 centimetres. A very, very popular edition, this one. It's been reprinted several times in this sort of facsimile form. So facsimile of this first edition by the Folio Society. You can still get it today, or at least not without any trouble at all. There's lots of copies online of the reprint. And of course, illustrated by Mervyn Peake, later of Gorgomast fame. He was the artist who first designed the Pan Books logo, which would have been around this time, maybe a year or two beforehand. It says the 12 illustrations were printed from relief blocks in the yellow and black. And most of the illustrations appear opposite the opening of a new chapter. Now in Folio 21, Charles Ede added the brush-drawn illustrations in black and yellow were reproduced by letterpress. The yellow had also been used for initials and some display lines for which it was too weak. So he is right, that there is a little bit, it's like lost on the paper. The illustrations are an interesting example of how, with a strong text, indirect visual treatment of dramatic passages can heighten the reader's reaction. Now the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is an 1886 Gothic horror novella by the Scottish author Robert Louis Stevenson, and it follows Gabriel John Utterson, a London-based legal practitioner who investigates a series of strange occurrences between his old friend Dr. Henry Jekyll and a murderous criminal named Edward Hyde. It's obviously one of the most famous pieces of English literature and is considered to be a defining book of the Gothic horror genre. The novella has also had a sizable impact on popular culture, with the phrase Jekyll and Hyde being used in the vernacular to refer to people with an outwardly good but sometimes shockingly evil nature. And this isn't the first time that the Society printed what would be, classed as, Gothic horror or horror of the period, and they do it very, very well indeed. And this is a key early book in the Folio Society's years of publishing. In the first 3 years, this is an absolute key book. It's not cheap. Undust wrappered copies I have seen sell for about £20, and a wrappered one you're probably looking at about twice that, depending on condition. This one isn't great condition, but it'll do for me. I said, if you really, really want this one and would like to enjoy it, you can get the facsimile for less than £20, and I may well do that just because it looks a great addition to actually read that one. So yeah, very, very nice, and a beautiful, beautiful edition. Okay, the next book is Mademoiselle de Maupin by Théopold Gautier, translated by R.N.E. Powers Mathers, illustrations by Mark Severin. And this was 288 pages. It's a reasonably large book, plus 8 plates reproduced by collotype, and it's a Perpetua type is the typeface used. It's got a cream cloth boards with the title in like the gold lettering and on the spine with the blue background. Is really nice, actually. That's really excellent. It's got 16 shillings. Don't forget, a lot of the books had a British cover price because these were sold in bookshops. Very limited, but bookshops could actually sell these. You didn't have to be a member of the Folio Society to get your hands on them, not at this point in time anyway. Now, Charles Ede added the following personal note in Folio 21. He says, the form of this book was dictated by the somewhat alarming financial situation existing at the time. The text was reproduced by offset and in a reduced size from the edition published by the Golden Cockerel Press. Now, I'll have a look at a few Golden Cockerel Press books with you in just a moment. And the resulting bastard format had been found useful on a number of subsequent occasions, not least for the Shakespeare series. The pencil drawings should have been engravings, but we could just not afford to pay for the additional work. So, obviously it's quite a long book, but there are a few illustrations inside here. But they're done in pencil rather than like engravings, basically, is what they're saying. Well, they are a bit few and far between. Now, here's one here, and that looks okay to me. But yeah, it is just a pencil drawing rather than anything else. Is that one there? No, it's just a blank page between the chapters. Some of the illustrations, I'm being a bit careful because some of them are a little bit risque, shall we say. But that's sort of the nature of the book, and it is actually about a woman who uses her incredible beauty to capture both Albert, a young poet, and disguised as a man, his mistress Rosette. Now, online you'll see the blurb about this book. It says, in this shocking tale of sexual deception, Gautier draws readers into the bedrooms and boudoirs of a French chateau in a compelling exploration of desire and sexual intrigue, and gives voice to a longing which is larger in scope, namely for the wish for completeness in oneself. So there we are. But I think it might be quite fun, since it's been mentioned, if we have a little look at just a handful. I've got just a handful of books by the Golden Cockerel Press, so you get an idea of where the Society's origins sort of have come from. So here's my, I think this is my earliest Golden Cockerel Press. Now, the thing about the Golden Cockerel was it was a private press, so their books generally are very lavish and high productions, but in limited numbers, and they were really expensive to buy at the time. So this one is a 1923, that looks like, and you can see some of the similarities, the two colour and the text there. Some of them have got illustrations in fact most of them do have illustrations of a sort, and the top edge is usually cut and the bottom and side edges on Golden Cockerel are not. Almost all of them are limited and or numbered. So this one here, let's see if it's got a limitation at all. Yeah, so this one was limited to 450 copies. And this one's copy number 246, and there's the Golden Cockerel Press logo. So that's an example of one of their sort of more larger books. This is something a bit more familiar because it's much more in keeping with a Folio Society book. And this is their Guinea series, which they cost a guinea at the time. And this one is Lord Adrian. Engravings by Robert Gibbons. You may have heard of him, a great illustrator with his wood engravings. And very, very nice indeed. Once again, this one's a limited copy. This is number 78 of 325. This is published in 1933, this one. This is what Charles Ede himself, he was a real fan of this press. This is another one here. The same series, same sort of size, the Guinea ones, Crime Against Kinnear, 1934. nice. You can see the similarities here. And I think what Charles Ede tried to do was bring something like this much more mass market rather than these limited runs. This one is actually limited to 250. This is number 166, and it's signed by the author. And then this one much more akin to, say, the copy of Jekyll and Hyde, which we've just looked at here. This one's quite easy to find. In fact, we'll turn it around that way. There's their Golden Cockerel on the front there. Here we are, the Bella Morphi. Very, very nice. That's copy 498 of 750. So you can see the similarities between these Golden Cockerel Press books and the Folio Society. Very, very similar indeed. And certainly the early years of the Folio Society, they hark back to what the Golden Cockerel Press were publishing at that time, but just much more sort of mass market, as it were. So the next book we've got is the Odyssey, and the first time the Folio Society ever published the Odyssey, and this is by Homer, of course. It's translated in Selection by F.L. Lucas, with 16 copper engravings by John Buckland Wright. Now this is bound in a brown canvas with sort of the gilt blocked figure on the front. This book, I believe, is quite scarce in its original dust wrapper. For a long time I had a copy just with the boards on, and the boards got very, very dirty because it's a nice edition, this one. It's 136 pages, 25.3 by 16.1 centimeters. Now the Odyssey is, of course, one of two major epics of ancient Greek literature attributed to Homer, and it's one of the oldest surviving works of literature and remains popular with modern audiences. Like the Iliad, which is to come, the Odyssey is divided into 24 books. It follows the heroic king of Ithaca, Odysseus, also known by the Latin variant Ulysses, and his homecoming journey after the 10-year-long Trojan War. His journey from Troy to Ithaca lasts an additional 10 years, during which time he encounters many perils and all his crewmates are killed. In Odysseus' long absence, he is presumed dead, leaving his wife Penelope and son Telemachus to contend with a group of unruly suitors competing for Penelope's hand in marriage. So that's what it's about. And the illustrations are very, very nice on this one, nice and clear. It's a beautiful book. And like they say, an absolute classic. I'm not sure how this translation holds up, but there have been many over the years. And yeah, the fellow did this book proud. Yeah, but as I said, I think the wrapper is quite scarce, you know. So if you see one in a wrapper, probably worth grabbing. Now the next book is another one in the poetry series. It's the Poems of Rupert Brooke, and this is perhaps my worst condition Folio Society book from the first 3 years. I've really struggled to find a nice copy of it. But let's tell you a bit about the book first of all. So it's got 9 illustrations by John Buckland Wright. It's quarter bound in blue leather, and originally I believe this had a glassine dust jacket for the very first printing. 164 pages, and you see it's quite compact here. Now the history of the dust jacket is a little unclear. In Folio 21 it states that an onion skin dust jacket was used. However, Folio 60 states that white dust jacket printed in blue and black, or a glassine dust jacket printed in black for the second impression of 1950, with a transparent plastic dust jacket printed in black. The original dust jacket is glassine, so I think all that confusion means the original first print of this, which is very hard to find this edition, had a glassine dust jacket, the first of the poetry books to have such a thing, and later on it had a printed jacket, and then I think later on again it actually came slipcased. But the version you're looking for, if you can find one, is this book, the 1948 edition. The 1950 reprint is much more common, and it has to have a plastic dust jacket on. That's what you're looking for. If you like poetry, this is a really, in fact, the poetry books I think are fantastic. I never really rated them until I actually saw them in the flesh, and they are excellent. And Rupert Brooke is quite the poet. So a little bit about him in a moment, but Charles Ede added in Folio 21, he says, "We could not at this juncture afford wood engravings, so suggested scraper board. The result was one of the artist's less happy efforts." Scraper board. Okay. So Rupert Brooke then. So he lived from 1887 to 1915, and he was an English poet known for his idealistic war sonnets written during the First World War, especially The Soldier. He was also known for his boyish good looks, which were said to have prompted the Irish poet W.B. Yeats to describe him as the handsomest young man in England. He died of septicemia following a mosquito bite whilst aboard a French hospital ship which was moored off the island of Skyros in the Aegean Sea. So he never made it out of the war, but the first 1914-1915, his war poetry, and these actually are dated, which is quite nice, see the little date there, are very poignant, and once again still in print and very popular today is Rupert Brooke. But this was the first time the Society published him in a very, very nice volume. This one, it's beautiful. I just wish I had a better copy of it. But there you go. So the next book is easily my favourite of the early Folio Society books from this video that we're looking at today, these first 3 years. This book is just terrific. It's the Voyagers of Lemuel Gulliver to Lilliput and Brobdingnag, and that's obviously by Jonathan Swift. You've all heard of Gulliver's Travels, and this is the first time the Folio took a stab at it. It's in a demi format, 174 pages with 12 6-colour plates, Baskerville type, with vesta for display, a quarter maroon cloth with beautiful marbled sides, and of course in the dust jacket as well. Now, we'll have a good look through this one in a moment. So Charles Ede said in Folio 21, "Paper rationing made it necessary for us to limit this volume to the first 2 voyages, but a complete edition of the travels, illustrated by the same artist, Edward Bawden, was published by the Society in 1965, and this particular series of videos I intend to go through to 1970, so we will see the complete voyages with Edward Bawden's incredible illustrations, which are, I'm going to take my time to go through these and show you each one. And for me, Edward Bawden is the absolute star of this particular book, and that's why I love it just so much. And we'll look at all the illustrations, and whilst we do that, I'll tell you a little bit about Edward Bawden. So he was an English painter, illustrator and graphic artist known for his prints, book covers, posters and even garden metalwork furniture. Bawden taught at the Royal College of Art, where he had been a student, worked as a commercial artist and served as a war artist during World War II. He was a fine watercolour painter, but worked in many different media. He illustrated several books and painted murals in both the 30s and the 60s. He was admired by Edward Gorey, David Gentleman and other graphic artists. And his work and career is often associated with his contemporary, Eric Ravelius. And there are many, many great books about Edward Bawden and his work. There's a handful that are in print today, which we'll have a look at my favourite in a moment. And I've got a couple of other books which were published around this sort of time. Just look at this grey, isn't it? Which I brought with me. They're not Folio Society books, but they are just a couple of gorgeous books I wanted to bring to your attention, illustrated by Bawden, that you might want to have on your radar if you like what you see here. So I'll pop Gulliver's Travels to one side, but what an amazing Folio Society book. So the first book is a King Penguin. It's called Life in an English Village. This is by far my favourite King Penguin book of all, 1949. It was a year after Gulliver's Travels. Life in an English Village, 16 lithographs by Edward Bawden, introductory essay by Noel Carrington. And you can see what I mean. If you like Bawden's work, this is just absolutely gorgeous. A very, very nice book indeed. It is quite collectible, this one. It tends to sell for between £30 and £50, depending on condition. It wasn't issued in a dust wrapper due to paper rationing. That did come a little bit later for the King Penguins, but well worth it. So that's one book I would recommend. The other one is also published by Penguin, but it came out as a puffin, and it's The Arabs. And it only ever had one printing. It's a puffin picture book, the original series of puffin picture books, and they released it in hardback. And once again, although Bawden didn't write it, the illustrations are just to die for. And there's some double-page spreads, which are just fantastic. And I know we are off just look at this. We are slightly off the subject of Folio Society, but, he's such a great illustrator. I don't have lots by him, although, I've got books of his work. And I thought now was a really good opportunity to highlight this great artist. So yeah, look out for those two. And the book I would recommend, which is still in print, this is Edward Bawden's London. So it is his London specific work. He did a lot more, of course. Yeah, V&A Publishing. And it's got all his sort of London transport stuff in here as well. Plus, his market ones. They're just terrific. I think his earlier wartime and pre-war is perhaps more what I like, but there's some great stuff. He did movie posters, countless book jackets. I mean, loads and loads of book jackets with such a distinctive style. He did the covers to the Fortnum and Mason catalogues, which are just terrific as well. There may even be one of those in here, I don't know. That's great, the pagoda there. Just superb. So there's a lot in this book. This is a really nice overview of his best work, I think. But he did so much. And this one's recommended. Very much. So that is Edward Bawden, and his folio edition of Gulliver is, well, an absolute triumph. Okay, so this last book for 1948 was a special commission, and it's the earliest chemical industry in the historical relations of economics and technology. You couldn't really make it up, could you? Look at it. The earliest chemical industry. Written by Charles Singer. It's prefaced by Derek Spence, and yes, it's quite the tome. It's so massive, in fact, I've had to pull it right back. If we have a look at the Life in an English Village, which we just looked at, you can see it's tiny in comparison. Now, this is not an easy book to come across, but it is part of the Folio Society story, and we have to cover it, So it's a huge book, massive, much bigger than anything the Folio Society had done up to this point. 340 pages, 34 centimeters by 22.5 across. It wasn't issued in a dust jacket, but there were 100 limited copies that were in full leather. But the entire book is a limited edition of 1,100 copies. And so the first 100 were in full leather. Now, Sue Bradbury, in the essay I referred to at the start, the editorial director of the Society, wrote in her essay A Brief History, which is from Folio 50, among the activities which saved the Society from bankruptcy in its early days was the design of commissioned books. Ironically, the only folio-sized volume which the Society produced in those early years was a history of alum entitled The Earliest Chemical Industry, written by Professor Charles Singer to celebrate a major anniversary. It was, in fact, highly readable. Look at this. And as both the author and his wife were keen amateurs of book design and illustration, the result was pleasing and rewarding to all concerned. And there we are. So look, 1948, published by the Folio Society. And just look at the magnificence. It really is fantastic. And there's the little introduction there. The preface by Derek Spence. It's a demi-octavo and was printed at the Chiswick Press on the cream Arnold mould-made paper. Colour collotypes by Alamari and bound in red buckram. with the black leather spine. Now, in addition to the frontispiece, the book contains 181. There we are, 181 numbered figures, and these include 5 further plates, all but one in colour, and 13 colour lithographed illustrations pasted to the text pages. And if we flick through, now you'll notice as we work through, the book is not quite as perhaps well made as you might think. And you see here, you can see this sort of creasing. Now all copies are like this, and that's because on the next page we'll see one of the pasted down illustrations. And these illustrations here, there's 5 like this, were pasted in by hand into every single copy. They weren't put in and bound at the time. These were pasted in to fill the book up. Now the colophon describes the edition and states that 100 copies were bound in full red Morocco by Sandgorski and Sutcliffe and were signed by Singer and Spence. Beneath the colophon is a colour-engraved device. The 100 special copies were issued in a red cloth-covered slipcase. Folio 60 goes on to state that no copy with a dust jacket has been seen, and despite a reference to a jacket in the Folio archives, it is probable that the book was not issued with one. And this made up the 9th and final book from 1948, and just look at it, it is immense. Now, this was a book that took me quite the time to track down, simply because I did not want to pay, because most copies seem to be in America, for starters. For whatever reason they were exported. I have found some in the UK, and they were all coming in at around £150 a piece. In the end, a book dealer friend who I know had a copy which he let me have for 100, and up to now that's the most expensive folio book I have bought. And it is limited, so you know it's a good investment. It's, as you can see, it's an absolutely incredible book. It really is quite amazing. I've got nothing quite like it in my collection. The problem is it's so massive. Everything got fold outs. It's so massive it won't fit on the shelf with my other Folio Society books. I might even have to lie it down, which I don't particularly want to do. But just look at it. I mean, it is absolutely incredible. Now I'm trying to remember if the copies were numbered or not. Yeah, they were. So a bit like the Golden Cockerel here, we got another paste down here, and it says numbers 1001 to 1100 were bound, and this is copy number 234, and that's been written in there. So they are also numbered. So it is a true limited edition, and the first limited edition that the Folio Society ever published. So perhaps the subject matter is not perhaps something that you might be interested in, but just look at it, it's just amazing. This is another example of the paste down there, which is why you've got the ripples. Absolutely normal. So the only thing I would advise is obviously try and find the best copy that you can, but because the boards are red, very, very susceptible to fading. So you can see that red spine would have been like that when it was first printed, but it's been on the shelf and sunlight's got to it, and as we've seen so often, it's caused it to fade. But apart from that, it's an absolute beauty, and I'm more than happy to have that copy in my collection. What a book, what a book. And so ends 1948 with those 9 books. On to 1949, the last year we're going to look at today. A Sentimental Journey Through France and Italy by Lawrence Stern, and introduced by Oliver Warner. So this one's got 16 leaves of colour plates by Nigel Lambourne, and it was bound in a full white cloth with a design in the blue, pink and black by Barbara Ward Lambourne. White dust jacket printed in blue, pink and black. 164 pages, 20.8 in height and 14.7 centimetres wide. Certainly a very, very handsome book, this one. And Charles Ede says in his write-up in Folio 21, he said the illustrations were drawn on plastic cowl, then a comparatively new process. There's an example. And in some cases the artist had difficulty in judging the final weight of the colours, which had to be drawn in black as separations. The white cloth was an object lesson in finger marking, and I bet it was. Certainly it's a beautiful edition of an undoubted classic. So Sentimental Journey Through France and Italy, first published in 1768, is a novel by Laurence Sterne. It follows the Reverend Yorick on a picturesque journey through France, narrated from a sentimental point of view. Yorick is a character from Sterne's best-selling novel Tristan Shandy, but also serves as Sterne's alter ego. The novel was planned as a 4-volume work, but Sterne died in 1768, and only the first 2 volumes were ever published. Yorick sadly never makes it to Italy. Well, there you go. But yeah, a nice little edition of that particular book, and yeah, once again, not a bad one in a nice dust wrapper. Very, very nice, that. Right, the next book we've got is Arabian Love Tales. This is being romances drawn from the Book of 1001 Nights, and it's by Anonymous, rendered into English from the literal French translations by Dr. J.C. Madris by Powers Mathers. 12 full-page line drawings by Lettice Sanford, of course, who was the wife of Christopher Sanford, one of the founders of the Folio Society, and he was then at that time one of the directors of Golden Cockerel Press. Bound in the full green cloth decorated in brown and gold, and leaves with a design in green by Sanford. A white dust jacket printed to blue, green and black. Now this is another reasonably scarce title, this one, and it's got some slightly risque illustrations, so we may have to tread slightly carefully with this one, but I don't think it's anything too crazy by today's standards. No, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, this is one that's, you know, on my upgrade list. I'd like to get a better copy of it, but I'm not, like, you know, mad for it. The subject matter, you know, it is what it is. It's not a book I'm probably going to be reading, but it's part of the Folio story, so I want a copy. And I did search for quite a long time to find one in a wrapper, and eventually got one from one of those places like World of Books. You know, this sort of thing. So only paid about £8-9 for this one, which will do as a placeholder until a better one should come my way. But there we are. Yeah, 1949. A little bit of foxing on that, but he's okay. Actually got a previous owner's signature still in the front there. So there we are. So that was Arabian Love Tales. So next up we've got Carmen, which is a romance by Prosper Mérimée, and includes a study of the opera by Winton Dean, which covers pages 85 to 124, with illustrations by Goya. This is in what they call demi format, 132 pages plus 8 plates reproduced in cellotype. And it was printed in monotone Garamond 12-point typeface. And it's got this beautiful cream cloth blocked with the frame motif in red by Kenneth Hobson on the front board and the spine. Now this one actually came with a printed acetate dust jacket, which sadly my jacket is missing. Copies have turned up in jackets. I've just not been quick enough to grab one. I missed one recently for a £5 this year, so I was a bit disappointed to miss out on that. Charles Ede says in Folio 21, the idea of tying up the opera with the novel seemed like a good one, but did not meet with a very rapturous response from members. Regardless, it's a stunning volume, and one which, sadly, as I said, I don't have the original glassine dust wrapper, but it's really nice, beautiful in the hand, and well, if this takes your fancy, not too difficult to find either. I think it's sold quite well, this one. Yeah, so Candide, very, very nice. But yeah, if you find one in a wrapper, give me a shout. So next up, we've got The Complete Angler, or The Contemplative Man's Recreation by Isaac Walton and Charles Cotton. Now this one has got drawings by Lytton Lamb inside, and it's bound in the full green cloth, as we'll see, with the border like a ruled border. Now it's sort of, it's got the lovely cloth, but yeah, this like border going around it. Got the name on the spine there, and the dust jacket is white but printed in grey and black. quite the tome, this one, 274 pages, 22.9 by 15 centimetres. Now, Charles Lamb stated in Folio 21, perhaps the highest compliment to the artist is the fact that these drawings, though free and impressionistic, still satisfied anglers of the most conservative complexion. There we are. Now, The Complete Angler was first published in 1653 by Richard Marriott in London, and Walton continued to add to it for a quarter of a century. It is a celebration of the art and spirit of fishing in prose and verse. So now you know. So if you're at all interested in fishing, then perhaps this is the book for you. If not, it may be one to give a miss unless you're collecting all Folio Society editions, which I am. Certainly Penguin did a very, very nice edition about 12 years prior to this one, which is another beautiful one. But there we are. Now we'll be back to this one because there's like a companion volume a little later on, so I'll just pop this to one side. So next up we've got Grimm's Folk Tales, and this is translated and introduced by Eleanor Quarry. Now this is the small crown format. It's 208 pages, 18 leaves of coloured plates, monotype imprint from the Old English for display. So there we are. It's got a particular typeface, and printed by Mackay and bound up by Mackay in the full crimson cloth with a figure of the elf in gold on a grey panel. Now this one actually came with a very attractive dust jacket, which I'll flash up a picture of on the screen now, and I'd really like to get hold of this particular one, but for the time being this one actually doesn't look too bad in its original boards. So Charles Ede says in Folio 21, it says the first new translation to be commissioned by the Society. The illustrations originated in a set of watercolours reputed, there we are, to be by Cruikshank. It proved impossible to separate out the black key drawings for reproduction, so we returned to the etchings as a base and used the watercolours as a guide for colouring only. Some months after publication, we were informed by an expert that the originals were probably forgeries by another member of the Cruikshank family. There's another example there. So in Folio 60, it says on the issue of the Cruikshank watercolours, Folio 60 says, the Cruikshank etchings were reproduced lithographically in monochrome and hand-coloured by Maud Johnson, using as models a series of watercolours thought to be by the artist. However, Charles Ede was told after publication that these were probably forgeries by another member of the Cruikshank family, and when the book was reprinted, the etchings were not coloured. And yeah, there we are. And as I said, my copy is sadly missing its dust wrapper, but it's a pretty nice book, this one. And I like the little illustrations. I think they're really nice. Yes, good stuff, eh? Yeah, a few recognisable stories in there, I'm sure you'll agree. There we are, 1949. Very cool, and even without a dust wrapper, it doesn't look too bad, that one. So next up, the first Surtees, Jorrocks, Jaunts and Jollities by R.S. Surtees. Wow. So this is a medium 8-vol, 228 pages with 14 plates, an engraved title page reproduced by collotype and coloured by hand. Bound by Mackay in full scarlet buckram, and it was uniform with the Complete Angler. So you see we've got the little edging around there. And if we pull the Complete Angler over here, the two could be brothers or even sisters. Look at that. Very, very similar indeed. And they were designed that way, which is why I kept the Complete Angler to hand. Now, white dust jacket, as we can see, printed in grey and black. The plates were drawn by Henry Aiken for the second edition of 1843. And there we are, the second plate, this one here, is a steel engraving title reading the Jaunts and Jollities of that renowned sporting citizen, Mr. Martin Jorrocks of St. Botolph Lane and Great Coram Street. All the plates were printed lithographically in monochrome and hand-coloured in poker by Maud Johnson, and they are a blimmin' delight. Absolutely amazing. I had no idea they were going to be this lovely. And there's a list of all the illustrations. There's quite a few of them as well. And Charles Ede states in Folio 21, he says, the hand colouring by the stencil process for this and other titles in the series was carried out by Maud Johnson. When the book was published, we immediately received requests from members for the other Surtees novels, and so embarked on our first series. In the case of Surtees, this proved to be a very unbusinesslike decision, as most of the other novels run to considerable length, and it's true, they are very big books. The lesser-known titles were not popular, and these had to be printed in thoroughly uneconomic editions. They're great, aren't they? Apart from this, however, we prefer to avoid series treatment whenever possible, as the problem for the designer becomes boringly repetitive, while it is often impossible to put right any fault in the original conception in subsequent volumes. Surtees indeed formed a sizable proportion of the Society's early output, accounting for 8 of the first 100 publications, so we will be seeing a lot more of Surtees in the videos in this series to come. I've never read him, but I hear he's very, very good, and I gotta admit, my interest when I was researching this video and this book was piqued, I have to say, and these are, I think, really, really nice editions. So I looked into a little bit about Surtees and found this online. So Surtees attended a school at Ovingham and then Durham School before being articled in 1822 to Robert Purvis, a solicitor in Newcastle upon Tyne. Now Surtees left for London in 1825, intending to practice law in the capital. Just look at that. What a beautiful illustration. He launched out on his own with the New Sporting Magazine in 1831, contributing the comic papers which appeared as Jorrocks, Jaunts and Jollities in 1838. Jorrocks, the sporting cockney grocer, with his vulgarity and good-natured artfulness, was a great success with the public, and Surtees produced more Jorrocks novels in the same vein, notably Handley Cross and Hillingdon Hall, where the description of the house is very reminiscent of Hampsterley. Another hero, Soapy Sponge, appears in Mr. Sponge's Sporting Tour, possibly Surtees' best work. All Surtees' novels were composed at Hampsterley Hall, where he wrote standing at a desk, like Victor Hugo. So there you go. Looks pretty interesting, doesn't it? It looks pretty interesting, so I do intend having a little dive in there to see what this is all about. But yeah, quite interesting, that one, and the first of their first ever folio series. So next up we've got The Parson's Daughter and Other Stories by Anthony Trollope, with engravings by Joan Hassel. Now this was selected and introduced by John Hampton, and this is 240 pages, including a frontispiece and 16 illustrations in the text. Bembo type, bound by Mackay in full cream cloth, printed in green, with a repeat design in reverse. And this one's got a leather label, which is up there, and printed by the Chiswick Press. And the white dust jacket is printed in green and black, and it just replicates the front, the boards, basically. Now you might be familiar with the Society's massive, extraordinary 48-volume Trollope series, which includes all 46 of Trollope's novels, his autobiography, and a single volume of short stories. However, long before that series was commissioned, the Society produced these two volumes of Trollope short stories, and the first one of which is this one here. So if you want them all, you do actually need to get this one and the following one, if you want the complete Folio Society Trollops, because what's in here is not replicated in that mega series which came a little bit later. John Hampton was the Society's literary advisor from 1949 to 1954, when a long spell in hospital made it impossible for him to continue. The other stories in this volume are La Mère Bouchie, Father Giles of Balamoy, The Spotted Dog, and Alice Dugdale. And I think it's a really, really nice volume. This one, I've read very little Trollope, but a bit like how I'm enjoying Tolstoy by reading a few short stories by that author, I think this is the way to dip my toe into Tolstoy, into Trollope rather, and see if I enjoy the books or not. But that's the 5 books there, including the title one, The Parson's Daughter of Oxney Colne. Nice little edition, that one, and I haven't got the second one. It's haven't tracked a copy of that one down yet, but certainly this one, it's in a slightly fraying dust wrapper, as so many of the dust wrappers were. They weren't printed on very good quality paper, the Folio Society dust wrappers, so generally speaking they are quite delicate, and I'm going to be going through and wrapping all my Folio Society books in a brand new plastic wrap, but I wanted to film them before I did that because it makes them incredibly difficult to film. Okay, so this is the next to last book, and it's poems. This is the Poems of Shelley. It's obviously by Percy Shelley and selected and introduced by Richard Church. Decorations engraved on wood by John Buckland Wright. And it's 208 pages, includes the frontispiece and 35 head and tail pieces printed in sepia. The book itself was printed by the Chiswick Press in Perpetua type and bound by Mackay in quarter sepia leather. There we are. Pale blue cloth sides, and this one once again had a printed glassine dust wrapper, which is very scarce. This is the 3rd title in the Society's informal poetry series, shall we say, following the Shakespeare sonnets and the poems of Rupert Brooke. Mine obviously has not got the dust wrapper, as you can see, but it's in much better condition. I think this one's a little bit easier to get, but in a wrapper, who knows? I haven't really tried to track one down, the glassine wrapper, but I would love one. And a little bit about Shelley, I think, is in order while we have a flick through this one. So Percy Bysshe Shelley was an English writer who was considered one of the major English romantic poets, a radical in his poetry as well as his political and social views. Shelley did not achieve fame during his lifetime, but recognition of his achievements in poetry grew steadily following his death, and he became an important influence on subsequent generations of poets, including Robert Browning, Algernon Charles Swinburne, Thomas Hardy, and W.B. Yeats. Now, his second wife, Mary Shelley, was the author of Frankenstein, and Shelley himself died in a boating accident in 1822. He was just 29. I do recommend reading Penguin #1, Ariel, which is basically Shelley's life story, and it's written by Andre Moreau, and it's recommended. So do track down a copy of that if you haven't read it. I read it last year and it was really interesting. I have to say, I did think at the end he was sort of his own worst enemy, but there you go. He seemed to attract trouble. But anyway, that is, that's the Poems by Shelley. So this is the last book, number 22, and the final book published in 1949, School for Scandal, by Richard Brinsley Sheridan. And this is introduced by none other than Sir Laurence Olivier, with designs for the costume and the decor by Cecil Beaton. It's got 120 pages, 5 monochrome plates and 16 line drawings, plus 9 colour plates reproduced by offset. It's a Baskerville type throughout, as we can have a look through. Very nice indeed. And the cover is this beautiful red cloth with a gold silhouette there, which is very nice, by Beaton. My dust jacket is quite worn, as you can see. It's got lots of little nibbles and cuts out of it, which is quite common. Now, in Folio 21, Charles Ede states the edition was published to coincide with the opening of the Old Vic production produced by Olivier, who also played Sir Peter Tizzle, and designed by Beaton. So it was basically a theatre tie-in. The School for Scandal is a 5-act comedy of manners by Irish playwright Richard Brinsley, Sheridan. It was first performed in 1777. Now, the play satirises the hypocrisy and gossiping of fashionable 18th century London society, and is considered one of the greatest English comedies. The plot revolves around the schemes of a group of ruthless socialites who form a school for scandal to ruin people's reputations through gossip. The central targets are the Surface brothers, the charming but honest Charles, and the hypocritical Joseph, who both pursue the wealthy Maria. So there, it sounds quite fun, doesn't it? Really nice book, this one, and it's a bit of a teaser for the very lavish Shakespeare books which are to come, which we'll see some of in the next video when we do the next 3 years. But yeah, so that brings to a close the Folio Society from 47, 48 and 49. A bit of an epic in its making. It's taken hours to film all this lot, and hopefully I'm going to be able to pull it together in the editing suite to make it a bit more flowing for you. And if you have enjoyed this one, do please give it the thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel for the next parts. Anything you'd like to add, do please leave a comment below, even if it's just to say you enjoyed it. It really does help, and do share this one with your folio-loving friends. So there you go. That covers the first 3 years of the Folio Society. I do hope you've enjoyed that one. If you have, do please give it the thumbs up. Do please hit that subscribe button for regular vintage Folio Society content, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.